Yesterday, all my troubles seem so far away. Now it looks as though they're here to stay. Oh, I believe in yesterday. Suddenly, I'm not half the man I used to be. There's a shadow hanging over me. Oh, yesterday came suddenly. Why should have to go? I don't know. She wanna tell. I said something wrong. Now I long for yesterday. Now I need a place to hide away. Oh, I believe in yesterday. I believe in.
Yesterday reflects the Beatles' innovation in that it was innovative in and of itself. It holds many world records to this day, being the most recorded song of the 20th century, with over 3,000 different covers and played over 7 million times as of the year 2000.
In the 1960s, everyone was playing love songs, including the Beatles. But then the Beatles started to show tremendous growth after each and every record. Through the 60s, the Beatles revolutionized music by moving us out of the love song stage and into a more psychedelic era. The music that the Beatles wrote in the 60s laid the foundation for music from then on and drove the idea of music onward. If we hadn't experienced the Beatles, where do you think we would be musically today?
Before they were Beatles, they were born, in Liverpool, all around 1940. John Lennon, George Harrison, Paul McCartney, and Ringo Starr, real name Richard Starkey, were all about the same age and were merely acquaintances for most of their schooling.
By the age of 17, John had his own skiffle band called the Quarrymen. Paul, by this time, had already had extensive experience in music, was able to play 40 different instruments, and had been enrolled into a school for extremely smart children from an early age.
Eventually, Paul and George joined the Quarrymen along with Stuart Sutcliffe and Pete Best, as well as a few others. When the band started feeling official, the name began to change, from the Quarrymen to the Silver Beatles. After the Silver Beatles, they were shortly named the Beatles. Then finally, Paul changed the second E to an A. The spelling now referred to a musical beat and not a bug.
After they had a name, the band began to refine. Stuart was kicked out because he played his instrument too much like a Rolling Stone, and soon after he suffered from a brain aneurysm and died. Pete Best was replaced with Ringo because the census of the band was that Ringo was a better Beatle.
In May of 1960, when they were the Silver Beatles, they went on a 9-day tour of northern Scotland as a backup band for Johnny Gentle. Then 3 months later, they traveled to Hamburg as Beatles for the first time, playing steadily at a club. 2 months later, they were deported from Germany because George had been caught being under 18, and about the same time, Paul and Pete got arrested for nailing a condom to a wall and igniting it.
This was merely the beginning of their touring stage, which lasted from 1960 to 1966, with 1964 marking the beginning of Beatlemania in America. The touring ended in 1966 because the Beatles were simply tired of it. They couldn't even hear their own instruments because the crowd was always so ridiculously loud. So after their final appearance at Candlestick Park, they officially went into studio recording.
The Beatles rarely repeated themselves in their music. Unlike many rock and roll singers who preceded them, they did not attempt to continually recycle the sound of their first hit over and over, a mindless strategy that was followed by far too many artists and producers in the 50s and early 60s. Each new Beatles record, particularly after the first 2 albums, showed significant creative growth.
The Beatles were extremely creative artists, and the combinations of their 4 personalities gave rise to a rare studio environment that none of them could later duplicate individually, nor has any succeeding group recaptured. More than anything else, it is the lasting quality of the Beatles' music that accounts for their continued magnetism.